So, hello, fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And I apologize for how I sound. I'm a little bit extra lispy because I was just having some frozen ice blocks, chewing them up. Anyway, wanted to talk about Joe Rogan's guest, Michael Yo. And for me, this is the famous Michael Yo because Joe Rogan's mentioned him a couple of times when he's talked about the coronavirus and how hard it hit his friend Michael Yo, who everybody who knew agreed, sweetest guy, nicest guy. So Michael Yo was talking about his horrible experience catching and going through the rigors of and recovering from and he's still recovering, he says, from the coronavirus. And this dude had a really, really bad experience. And I thought that Joe Rogan had said that he had a pre-existing thing like asthma. But as far as he is saying, no, he had nothing. The only thing that he had was like migraines. But I was really struck by the fact that he said at one point he was in so much pain, I guess, with respect to headaches and the way that his whole body felt, that he said if there was a way to tap out, to just make all the pain stop and just die, he probably would have. And I thought, wow, that is crazy. Especially since he was mentioning the story with his son, that, one day he had a fever and another day he had a fever. And then he woke up one day and he couldn't breathe. And his wife had to call the ER or call an ambulance to get him. And as he was leaving and he could barely breathe and he could barely move, his son, who I believe is 3, put his hand up against the glass, and it was like that moment from a movie, and the son was crying. And I thought, wow. But yet he said he tried to keep his thoughts on his family, but he couldn't because he was in such pain. And there was so much that he mentioned about the whole experience of being like that. Of course, he went through this stuff where he treasures every moment now. And he and Joe Rogan, as they talked, Joe Rogan mentioned the fact that these things fade from memory. Just like, a deceased relative's face fades from memory, or things that they used to do. That brush with death fades from memory, and we go back to how life used to be, taking things for granted. But that said, he realized at the time that he could have died, and the doctors basically were telling him that they didn't know. They would see what would happen. They would see how it would go. And is it that Joe Rogan really realizes that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work anymore? Because I think he mentioned the remdesivir that they mentioned, that Fauci mentioned, Dr. Fauci. But I guess he didn't read up on it again, because Michael Yo was telling him that, yeah, it doesn't save lives, it just reduces the recovery time. And he didn't seem to know that was the case. So I'm glad that Joe Rogan has time to spend with his family, but I guess he picks and chooses. Even though he's interested in the virus, he doesn't seem to read too many articles about the outcomes of some of these things. I don't know when it would have been released, but actually the first time I heard about the drug, they were saying that, hey, it's not really going to save lives, it just reduces the time. I mean, that's the very first article that I read about it. Anyway, Michael Yo was mentioning the fact that he went to eat, I think, at a restaurant, and the manager sent him a private message afterwards, basically being very upset about the fact that the guy, you came here and you exposed us to coronavirus and da da da, and I guess he had not announced that he had recovered from it. So everybody was like, oh my god. But the thing is, I don't know how he knew that this was somebody who had coronavirus, and yet he didn't know that the guy had recovered from it. I mean, does he think it's a permanent thing like HIV? Or I guess sometimes people don't really stop and think before they send out the information, because you should be able to have a sense of how much time has passed since you heard that someone had coronavirus and then you see them. I mean, I don't know of anybody who, and I have heard reports of relapses, but I don't know of anybody who has this persistent coronavirus infection that goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks. So anyway, Michael Yo said he was really upset, and the people, when he reached out to the guy's superior, they were really concerned that he might sue or something like that. But then I guess he appreciated better when he, because when he went to the hospital, apparently all the neighbors, everybody came out and they saw that he was being taken to hospital. And when he recovered and he came home, as soon as anybody saw him in the street, they would all go into their houses, call their kids inside their houses. So I feel like that. I understand people's fear, but at the same time, I understand that people really need to control themselves, honestly. I mean, I don't like needles. And this is something that I don't mention it to everybody, but every single time I have ever gotten an injection, I hate it. And yeah, you know, you hate it. You hate it when you sneeze, you hate it when you cough, you hate it when, but I feel like a needle is stabbing me. I feel like it's literally stabbing me. You know, it's like a knife. Okay, but it's not going to leave this huge scar, and it's not going to cut. I don't understand how anybody can just sit and just get an injection. Because inside of my head, I really want to slap it out of the person's hand and run off. And that's what I mean, that people should be able to control themselves. I mean, if I'm a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, yeah, I'll act out on my fears and concerns like that. But beyond that, we have to be able to, or we should be able to realize, hey, I'm afraid. But does my fear make sense? And how much am I willing to invest in my fear? You know, in terms of just the relationship, because at some point they're going to get the coronavirus, and people by rights should act towards them as they have acted to other people. And how are they going to like it? Anyway, and I was surprised. Michael Yo is mixed. He's half black and half Korean. And I don't know why his last name is Yo. That's something that maybe it's a stage name, perhaps, probably, or maybe not, because I don't know too many black people whose last name would be Yo, unless it's his stepfather that he's referring to, but then he had a biological father who was black and a stepfather who was black. I mean, the chances of that seems kind of low. I should look it up, but... And even then, his last name still might not be his mother's name, so that's an interesting thing. On another note, this was the most liberal I've heard Joe Rogan to ever be. This is crazy, honestly. And I figure it's because the guy was pretty liberal himself. Not like, hey, I'm trans. I don't know how liberal, because what's his name? Sorry, what's her name? Caitlyn Jenner is she doesn't seem to be that liberal. She is Republican, and is she pro-Trump? I don't know. But at the same time, yeah, you can be a transvestite. Well, that's not transvestite. She's transgender, right? I guess, wow. It's a good thing that I don't live in California, because apparently I would be canceled by now. Which really reminds me of this other comedian that I saw, who I also saw as a result of YouTube's algorithm, was also on Joe Rogan. I believe the guy's name is Nimish Patel. And sorry to be off of Michael Yo for a moment, but wow. This is an amazing world. This guy speaks fluent black. I mean, like, if I did not see him and know his name was Nimish Patel, he was just black. Because, anyway, he says that his father ran a liquor store in, was it New Jersey? And he said one side was the Bloods and one side was the Crips. And the only thing that they could agree on was that they both wanted to rob his father's store. Yeah, he's a comedian. But anyway, apparently he got in trouble for telling a joke about a transgender or gay black person. And he was saying that obviously being gay is not a choice, because no black person wakes up and says, being black is too easy, let me add gay to that. And apparently he said that joke at Columbia, and they took him off stage because of that. They found it was offensive, and he got famous. And he said, yeah, I was famous for a little bit, and it's addicting. And so I guess he recorded some of his sessions at the Comedy Cellar. I think Joe Rogan probably met him, and then I saw that there was a clip of him on Joe Rogan. So, but yeah, Michael Yo, that was the first time that I heard Joe Rogan express things like, yeah, why is anybody want to interfere with somebody else being gay, things that don't affect them, saying that he didn't think that churches should be able to be tax-free. That wasn't fair. And that, well, actually a couple other things, and I was like, whoa. But all in all, I guess he was speaking to somebody who was pretty, well, not, I keep saying pretty, but more liberal in terms of this guy. Of course, he's a minority. He got a double scoop of minority, being Asian and black. And he mentioned the Aubrey case, which is going on now in Georgia, of course, and the fear and concern, of course, of just going jogging one day and people with guns want to arrest you, and the whole long thing. So I was surprised. I guess, it's like Joe Rogan says, and it's like anybody else, things that I found in my life. We are what I would call a fuzz, in that it's like how when they describe an electron doesn't circle a nucleus, an atom's nucleus. It's basically in a fuzzy area around the nucleus of an atom. And it's the same way that Joe Rogan feels about, I suppose, a lot of different things. In 1 minute he thinks that everything is overblown and exaggerated with respect to corona, and then the next minute he thinks that we're all gonna die. So I guess this was him with a liberal guest, and his more liberal side came out. So for me, it was a little bit unusual, because it seems more often. And then I look at some of the people that he's had on his show, like this guy, Crowder. He's a guy who was apparently spent an inordinate amount of time really casting a negative light on I guess it's a a Hispanic descent gay guy, journalist, and he spent a lot of his time coming up with stuff to say about this guy, to the extent that the guy even wrote and has come out saying that YouTube should do something about it, but they apparently weren't. So it became a whole thing, but yikes. And then some of the Milo, I can't remember his last name, this guy who was a guy from Breitbart. I'd be surprised if Joe hasn't had Steve Bannon on his podcast, because honestly, I know that Bill Maher has had Steve Bannon on his show, and Bill Maher is another guy who's a little bit more conservative leaning than one would perhaps like. But anyway, it was nice to see Michael Yo. I have to figure out if that's a stage name or what. And anyway, guys, you can wish me luck. You can like, unlike, comment, subscribe, and or share. And of course, you can do nothing. Peace.